Alright guys, welcome back. This is Shadow Dre. So now we get to the fun part, which is, as I like to call it, Rocket Tetris or something like that. Now before we get into the internals, let's take a quick blurb. I mean, we covered all the engines, the max thrust and stuff that you're going to get. We're going to work with the pump gas engine because it's just going to be simpler to show off. So we need to first go over mass versus weight. And this is something you have to very carefully consider designing around your rocket. And the mass is going to be the combination of the fuel, the engine, the fuselages, and miners, and then possibly more devices will eventually add mass. Currently, I believe in the beta they are thinking about adding mass to the other internals that you put in there, but as it is right now, at least on stable, just the engine, fuselages, miners, and the fuel add mass. And as far as fuel is concerned, volatiles and oxygen each are 16 kg per 1,000 mole. Nitrous oxide, however, is 46 kilograms per 1,000 moles. Just keep that in mind. But since we're going to be working with the pumped gas engine, we're not going to really worry about nitrous. But I just felt like pointing that out just in case you really want to calculate at the nitty-gritty details exactly how much weight you're adding to your rocket by fuel. And this is kind of why I went down to like 1,500 liter capacity, just because the more fuel you add, obviously the more mass you add to your rocket, which then makes it harder for it to take off, and it's just going to slow it down a bit in space. Ideally, you want to add only what you need. Now, as far as weight goes, you will only ever see the weight when it's in the planet because space has no gravity, and the game calculates weight as gravity times mass, and you can kind of see that fairly easily. So on our pump gas engine, see your total mass is 1953. I already got it filled up with fuel. So keep that in mind. I have my pipe analyzer here. I have almost 1,600 liters in pipe volume. There are no tanks or anything. So I have, what, roughly 37,700 moles of fuel at, pipe groaning pressures, which you can kind of hear it in the background. And you can see that I added 603 kilograms of mass. And my weight therefore, for the rocket is 7.23 kilonewtons. Now, recall that I said that you ideally don't want this number to exceed over half of your rocket's weight. And it's going to come into more play later. But as you can see, my base rocket only is 1,350 kilograms. I haven't added anything else to it. It's just purely the batteries. This is all I've added right here. There's no miners, no anything else. And as you can see, I already filled it to the brim with fuel, and that's quite a bit of weight added. And of course, that weight is 1953 times 3.7. So definitely is good that you pay attention to this, because this is going to heavily dictate exactly what you can fit in your rocket at what amounts. So the fact that my mass is already this high, and keep in mind this is that middle rocket right there, so that's three fuselages worth. This might mean that I may want to cut down a fuselage or two if I want to fit extra miners, but that depends whether how tightly you fit everything in here, and whether it can all work to your advantage, if you can make it all work. So I just want to point it out that as you fuel up your rocket and come up with pipe capacity, just definitely try to make it as compact as possible. So now, most of the moons are going to have less than 2 meters per second squared of gravity, so that means you're not going to have as high weight. Mars is 3.7, that's the middle ground. Vulcan and Venus are capped out at 5.5, so those are going to be the toughest planet to get stuff done. And of course, there's a simple calculation. 1,800 kilograms, and Mars is 6,600 newtons in weight. Now, the reason I want to mention this is because all of the rocketry, the travel is measured in delta V, or acceleration. So essentially, the faster you accelerate, the faster your rocket can get to places. And this is all dependent on mass. The formula, of course, is F equals mass times acceleration, which you can solve for acceleration, which is your engine thrust that you calculated, minus weight if you're in orbit, divided by total mass, or not orbit, minus weight if you're still on the planet headed to orbit. My bad. So just keep that in mind. So with that in mind right here, 16.3 kilonewtons. That's what my engine is. So 16,300. If I were to launch this rocket, I'm going to lose 7.23 kilonewtons. That means I only have about 9,000. 9,000. Yeah, 9,000 kilonewtons. No, not 9 kilonewtons of thrust that is going to work on my rockets, and then divide that by 1953. That means my rocket is accelerating up at 4.64 meters per second squared. Now, the rocket has to reach a velocity of 400 meters per second before it hits orbit. So, divide 400 by this number I calculated. It'll take about 86 seconds for my rocket to go from ground to space. And then once it's in space, then all of a sudden, my entire 16.3 kilonewtons applies to that mass, Now, it's not going to be exactly 1953 because it's going to be in space. But, that puts my acceleration at, what, 8.3? Which means I travel much faster. So just keep that in mind. You don't really want to go too heavy on the mass because it'll affect your space travel. And, I have some calculations here. And I chose 2150 because that's around the point that it's halfway. And so, for example, if your entire trip is going to be 2,000, a delta V of 2,000, it'll take 264 seconds of traveling in space at that rate. Just remember, weight is 0 in space. But, yeah. And so this is why I recommend that I did the video on the engines so that you can get numbers for your thrust value, or I encourage you to test fire your engines to get your total thrust. Because this is going to be how you decide how big your rocket's going to be or what you pack it with. Now, for my recommendation, ideally make sure that your rocket's weight is less than half of what your total thrust is. So 16,300. That means I don't want to have more weight that exceeds 8,000 kilonewtons, because this will definitely affect your landing, and this will definitely affect how much you can really pack in just to be safe with what you got. So, but overall, the less mass you have, the faster your acceleration, so it can arrive in space quicker. So yeah, just another blurb. Extra mass means less acceleration. So just try to build tight and small for your rockets. Now, what this means for the planets, for the Mars, Vulcan, and Venus, because they have such a high gravity, and thus in turn they make the weight bloated, you're going to have very low acceleration while the rocket is leaving to go to orbit. And then once you hit orbit, then all of a sudden you have a big jump in acceleration. Like for example, in Venus, your rocket could barely be moving at 1 meters per second squared, or acceleration of 1 meters per second squared as it goes up to orbit. It'll take forever to get to orbit because that's like, what, 400 seconds. But as soon as it hits orbit, then suddenly you have like your acceleration could jump up to maybe 10 meters per second squared, because suddenly there's that high gravity is no longer playing against you. Well, actually, that was wrong. It would be 6.5 meters per second squared, because this acceleration due to gravity is being taken away from your overall acceleration. So just keep that in mind. So now that I've gone over the quick mass versus weight, why you should consider not having as mass heavy rocket, let's go to the other internals that you can build in there. So quick overview. First of all, of course, is going to be the miners. Because, after all, you're sending it out in space to mine, unless you're just going to send the rocket out in space to be a celestial tracker. I mean, yeah, you can do that, but, I mean, for the most part, you're sending it up to mine. Each miner adds 500 kilograms of mass. That's the equivalent of 2 fuselages currently. I don't know if this is going to be updated in beta or not, but just giving you a heads up, that's a lot of mass to add to a rocket. Miners can do either space ore or space ice, and it does need miner heads in order for you to tell it what it's going to be grabbing. Now, there's a lot of different types of heads, so miner head. Okay, minor heads. There we go. So you basically got the basic, a durable, long term. Then you got ore, which is mineral, or ice, or high speed ore, high speed ice, and that basically just adjusts the statistics of the minor head. So the basic head has pretty much 100%. No extra power. Doesn't have extra yield. Lasts does not last extra. Doesn't have enhanced speed. As compared to the durable head, as you can see, the durable head lasts much longer. It uses double the power compared to the basic. It is 10% slower. And now if you look at, for example, long term, it's just basically cuts the power in half, really high duration. Versus the mineral head, it's twice as durable, but extra ore yield at the cost of no ice yield. And then the ice head is about the same thing. Extra ice yield, no ore yield. And then you have the high speed mineral, high speed ice, which is the same yield, 20% faster, significant, 8 times the power usage. I believe this is going to get adjusted in the beta. I think it was going to go down to 200%. I'll be honest, as far as whether you should use high speed mineral or high speed ice, I don't even recommend the high speed mineral. It's a lot of extra power for your rocket, and it doesn't really give you much more. It causes your rocket to deplete its batteries much faster, but if there's any good place that will be is for when you can only fit maybe 1 or 2 heads, mining heads. At that point, you're gonna get more yield, slightly faster at the cost of extra power, which is probably gonna be fine because it's not like you're gonna be using that power anywhere else. That's the same thing for the high speed ice. So that's the heads. You get to decide what you're gonna be mining, what heads you need, and yes, you can interswap them. Now, the other thing that the rocket needs to do is have scanners. And that's because the scanners are going to be the main focus for the rocketry. They chart new places to go, they discover mining sites, and then they survey the mining site to find out what its yields and statistics are. They do need a scanning head. Currently, they don't add mass. And of course, the more of them you have, the faster you complete those actions so that you're waiting, so the rocket is there for a shorter amount of time. And then cargo storage, applies to the minor heads. So you have 2 sizes, and they are either small or large. And currently, to my knowledge, there is no extra mass except for when cargo is in. You get 1 kilogram per stack that is used up in the cargo head. So it's very minor at the moment. Beta may change this. Small holds 50 stacks, large holds 100 stacks. And that's a lot because space ores and space ices stack to 100. So keep in mind, a small of 50 stacks times 100 is 5,000 total space ore slash ice that cargo can hold. And that can be massive. And then, of course, the only other device that we have is the Celestial Tracker. And all that does is it basically gives you orbital data for like the, well, I don't see any planets, but for basically celestial objects, like other planets and stuff like that. So it just grabs orbital data, and you can read that data and feed it to a telescope on the ground, the horizontal and vertical, so that the telescope can be tracking that celestial object. It's pretty neat, it's pretty niche, has no other use other than that. So, again, the beta may change these or add mass or something like that, and it's gonna affect it later. So let's go over how to build this whole thing with the Tetris. So what we got right now is just my basic rocket. It just has batteries, got my avionics, and it's got my link. Now, of course, you probably want your rocket to be mining. So the first thought you might think is, well, let's make 3 miners and let's get them in there. But before I do that, it's like one of those hold your horses, because remember, right now these things add 500 kilograms of mass. So let's go see what my weight of the rocket is after I added 3 of them. Oh boy, 3,453 kilograms, weight of 12.8 kilonewtons. That's a lot of weight. That is a lot. So my acceleration for leaving leaving into orbit. So 16,300 minus 12,800. Then divide that by the total mass, 3453 as it is right now. Yeah, it's like barely 1 meters per second squared. So it's going to take about 400 seconds for this rocket to take off, which is kind of a lot, because I mean 400 seconds times 18, I'm going to use 7,200 total moles of fuel just to get out there. So my total moles goes from 37,000 to maybe 30,000, and that's just to leave. And keep in mind that I have to do the same coming back, so I have to make sure that my rocket has about that much. And this is kind of where I get with the whole point where you want to make sure you have enough fuel for the trip, but you also don't want to overfill the fuel, because we're spending all of this just getting it out into space. This 7,200 moles of fuel is just being wasted getting the rocket to space. And as you can tell, my autolander says failure, which means it's going to crash. And I don't get it back until I start from 120 kilometers. So that's a lot more fuel that I'm going to be wasting. Because, yeah. So let's change that approach. Let's see what just 2 do for me. So now let's look at what the numbers are. Okay, they're a little bit better. 10.9 kilonewtons. I still probably wouldn't want to launch a rocket in this stage, just because that's still kind of heavy. High is okay. My personal opinion, if the rocket is says that it's capable landing on medium, 40-kilometer descent, I'd call that okay. That's my personal opinion. You can choose that. High is probably okay. 2 miners is going to mine for twice the speed. That's pretty good. Or at least for the rocket, you could have one miner be ice specific and the other miner be ore specific. That's up to you. So, you know, so let's see. I'm just going to remove it, go down to one miner head. So, and this is kind of where the whole rocketry thing, it takes a lot of finessing with this. Because you see, I technically have, a fuselage there, almost untouched top piece, and now I'm trying to fit miners. So I might actually not even need this middle fuselage, but unfortunately, in order to fit that in, I'd have to disassemble it from the top completely and remove everything down. And that can be quite a bit. So yeah. Now you need electronic parts to finish the miner head, so let's just finish the miner head with electronic parts. So we're just going to keep that one. And this is kind of where I get with the whole rocket Tetris thing, because now I got basically a miner. Well, a miner isn't going to do anything unless I bring some storage, so let's get the storage next. The simplest thing to do is just to put my chute storage, directly underneath the miner, like so. This is going to need some steel sheets to finish, and so I might as well grab the steel sheets, and let's just grab some chutes as well. Let's see, steel sheets. And then, of course, you do need to cable up all your devices for your rocket. And you see, there's going to be a lot of space in my rocket. Like, if this is all I'm doing, I really don't need that extra, that extra fuselage. I might be able to come up with a better way or fit better. So, as far as mining goes, that's kind of does that. We're going to need the umbilical out, so that's what this is going to be. That's for the umbilical. So, let's get the umbilicals. And it'll be around right here. There you go. So, we got one miner to one large cargo chute, and look at all this dead space. This is kind of where you have to kind of try to optimize it a lot. Like, I could actually probably just fit, change this miner and stick it right there. And just because I have an extra miner, let's just get it out. this is kind of where the joys of building the rocket are. You know, trying to find a way to be more space conscious for this. You know, if I have the miner right here, then, you know, obviously, this whole fuselage is dead space. I don't even need to worry about it. I can just drop it. Like, I could disassemble all of this and just have the miner be right there, right next to the cargo chute, and just, you know, shoot it that way and done. You know, I still have my batteries. I still could fit the avionics and stuff, you know, like right here on these two spaces. And I would still have plenty of extra space up here for probably something else, so try to figure out a way around it, you know? That's kind of where the whole Rocket Tetris comes into play. Probably one of the worst mistakes you can do is to think, well, I have a bunch of empty space, let me just add more fuel storage. But the problem with that is if you add more fuel storage, you'll probably want to fill it up even more. Which, again, fuel equals mass, which means now you're spending it just to get the rocket into orbit. That the best thing to do would be to try to fill all this space with something usable. Something useful. Which kind of comes to the scanners. So, as it is right now, you know, scanners are one of those that, you know, you need them on the rocket to perform a job. However, if you're not going to, you know, if you're not going to be mining on your rocket, then you're just not going to need them. I believe it's steel sheets, yep. Whoop. And as it is right now, scanners don't add any mass. That might change in the beta, it might change. And so you see, now I have 3 scanners. That's making the rocket look a little bit better. I still have a bunch of dead space here. But, you know, the thing about this space is you could put rocket IC housings and automate certain aspects of your rocket. And then, just for giggles, we're just going to add a rocket celestial tracker. Now, for this thing, let's see here. There we go. There's the top. There is a top, and I'm just going to try to orient the data connection to be at the 0, like so. What is that going to need? Electronic parts? Of course it does. So you're going to use quite a bit of electronic parts and cables for this rocket, so we're just going to have the celestial tracker just because. And get it ready. And let's just wire it up. And this rocket is obviously not very efficient in space, but that's fine. This is just a proof of concept, you know. The more you can fill out for this rocket, the better off you will be. Like, I could have probably put other cargo. I could squeeze another scanner head right there if I want to. But, you know, let's just keep it simple. This will be just a very simple rocket. Then as far as the miner head is concerned, you know, I'm probably just going to put a basic head just so that I can do either. One sec. Alright, got my miner head, sorry. And then we're just going to put the miner head right there. Alright. So there we go. So this is a Shadow Drake's rocket that did not follow any sort of Tetrising whatsoever, but I mean, you get the point. All of this space right here is essentially dead space. Like, I could probably, again, I could have eliminated an entire fuselage and instead had a rocket with 1 miner, 1 scanner, maybe instill enough space for control, and still actually kept my little vanity celestial tracker just you know, for giggles and stuff. And that's really what you're going to be going for dealing with the rocket, you know. And at the end of the day, you want to go back to your computer and see just what the weight is. So that's 9.08 kilonewtons of weight. And that's not too bad, considering that I should be shooting for a target of 2150 to have roughly half, you know, 2150. So after I spend about 300 kilograms of fuel, I'll be in that range. And as you can tell, my autolander says that I'll be okay at landing at 40 kilometers, which is nice and good. Landing at 25 kilometers is the least fuel expensive, so just that's kind of what I got to go on. So all in all, this is filled up. This is fueled up. It's got power. This is a functional rocket, and actually this is going to work well with my 3 miners scanners because it's going to expedite the scanning side of things quite a bit. So once you are happy with your rocket, time to finish welding it up. And again, this is very much trial and error. I fully expect that you'll probably start something and have to completely disassemble it and, do better on it. But I personally, I'm not happy with the way that is, as how much dead space I have in that rocket. I like to cram every nook and cranny with something that is useful in the rocket. But overall, this rocket is ready to fire. So let's see what we got. So to sum up for just the pump gas rocket, it would only land probably in 40 kilometers. It'll probably land earlier, probably as I spend fuel. But we have 1 storage. We have 3 scanners, which I am going to favorite them, as well as the miner and the cargo storage. So all that is going to be favorited and it's going to be up there. So I have 3 scanners for scanning, charting, surveying, all of that fun stuff. 1 miner to get resources I need, and a cargo storage medium so that I could just leave the rocket parked and just gathering stuff. And I do have 2 batteries. Now I could do more. I could have added more batteries, and that's especially if the rocket's going to be scanner heavy, because scanners use quite a lot of power compared to a miner. So let's take a quick look at that. So rocket scanners, they use 200 watts of power. Rocket miners use 100 watts of power. Now, if you have a high-speed head, that's 800 watts, for example. But, for a rocket that's scanning, you can actually build multiple rockets. You can build a tall scanner-heavy rocket, at least currently, because they don't add any extra mass. And that can quickly scan down sites and survey them for increased yields. And then you can send a heavier miner rocket to go and collect your stuff. A heavier, smaller miner rocket. And so that's kind of what I like to do. So hopefully this helps out with at least a little bit for how to plan out your rocket. Try to make the most of your space. Definitely try to make the most of the space that you chose for your fuselages. And don't add too much extra fuel capacity and make the mistake of just adding extra fuel. Because if I filled all of that space with fuel pipes and insulated pipes, then this mass is going to get really high because of the fuel. Like if I doubled the fuel, I would have an extra 1,200 kilograms of mass, which is going to make the rocket bulkier and heavier, and it's just not going to be worth it for the engine that I chose for this. So definitely more mass will be great for an engine that can consume that much, like the pressure fit engines. Alrighty, so that is that. Thank you for your time. When we return next, we're gonna cover launching your rocket into space, how to chart, how to survey, and how to mine all at once. So thank you for your time and have a good day.